Okay, so you want to own a Doberman. You're on the couch scrolling videos of sleek black and rust dogs standing guard outside mansions, and you've basically already named it. Get a puppy, raise it, end up with a loyal, intimidating best friend who also happens to protect the house. Easy. Here's the problem. The breed you just fell in love with has a coin flip chance of developing a heart condition that can kill it with no warning signs at all. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the real cost of owning a Doberman has almost nothing to do with the price tag on the puppy and everything to do with a piece of its genetics that most owners don't find out about until it's already too late. Plus why, for a small number of owners, this exact same breed is also a genuine six-figure business. There are three real tiers of getting into this breed, and the price gap between them reflects something buyers rarely think about up front. Tier 1 is the backyard bred puppy. No health testing on the parents, no pedigree paperwork worth the name, sold through a classified ad or a friend of a friend. These run $300 to $800, and it's the tier that looks like the obvious smart move if you're just budgeting for a pet. For reference, that's roughly what you'd spend on a nice weekend, except this weekend can turn into a decade of vet bills if you got unlucky on genetics, and you, on that couch, were absolutely about to go looking for the $300 one. Tier 2 is the reputable breeder, parents health tested for heart disease, hips, thyroid, and a bleeding disorder called von Willebrand's disease, with actual documentation to prove it. Breed clubs specifically recommend an OFA advanced cardiac exam performed by a board-certified veterinary cardiologist for any dog being bred, on top of hip and thyroid certification. Testing that itself costs the breeder hundreds of dollars per parent before a single puppy is even conceived. A pet-quality puppy from a breeder like this runs $1,500 to $2,500, and a show-quality puppy from a champion bloodline can run $3,000 to $5,000 or more. This is the tier breed clubs actually recommend because the health testing on the parents is the single biggest lever an owner has over what's coming in year 6 or 7. Tier 3 is the fully trained personal protection Doberman, a dog raised and trained by a professional kennel specifically for security work, not just obedience. Real companies in this space, like Trident Protection Dogs, price a trained Doberman starting around $45,000 for base-level obedience and protection work, climbing to $70,000 or more for advanced off-lead protection work involving scenario-based training and full off-lead control. At that tier, you're not really buying a pet. You're buying a finished security asset that happens to be alive, and the price reflects 1 to 2 years of professional development, not just the dog's bloodline. But the purchase price is almost irrelevant compared to what's actually built into this breed's biology. The first cost, and the one this entire video is built around, is dilated cardiomyopathy, or DCM. A long-term study published in the Journal of Veterinary Internal Medicine, tracking over 400 Dobermans through repeated echocardiograms and 24-hour heart monitoring, found the prevalence climbs sharply with age, from about 3% in dogs under 2 years old to nearly 10% by age 4, up to over 40% by age 6 to 8, and a cumulative lifetime prevalence of 58% overall. Meaning well over half of all Dobermans will develop this heart condition at some point in their life. It's inherited as a dominant genetic trait, it's progressive, and for the first 2 to 4 years it typically shows zero visible symptoms, while the heart muscle is quietly thinning and the chambers are dilating underneath with no outward sign the dog is anything but perfectly healthy. Think of it like flipping a coin on every single Doberman born, except the coin is weighted, and it doesn't reveal the result until years after you've already fallen in love with the dog. To put the age curve in concrete terms, a 2-year-old Doberman has roughly a 3% chance of showing signs of the disease, but by 6 to 8 years old, that number has climbed past 40%, and the disease doesn't announce itself climbing. It just quietly becomes more likely with every birthday, invisible the entire time. Veterinary cardiology guidelines now recommend starting annual screening, a combination of Holter monitoring and echocardiogram at 2 to 3 years old, and that screening alone can run several $100s a year, every year, for the rest of the dog's life. If DCM is actually diagnosed, ongoing medication, antiarrhythmics, pimobendan, diuretics, can run several $100s a month as the disease progresses, on top of the annual monitoring. And here's the part that makes this genuinely different from most breed health issues. Dogs affected by DCM have a median life expectancy of 7.8 years compared to 11 years for Dobermans who never develop it. That's more than a 3-year difference in lifespan, hiding inside a coin flip you don't get to see until years into ownership, which is more years of your life than you've spent on anything you've actually finished. The second cost is von Willebrand's disease, a genetic bleeding disorder common in the breed that makes routine surgeries, even a simple spay or neuter, carry meaningfully higher risk of uncontrolled bleeding. It works similarly to hemophilia in humans. A missing or deficient clotting protein means a cut or incision that would be routine in a normal dog can bleed longer and more seriously than expected. Dogs need to be specifically tested for it before any procedure, and a dog that tests positive may need a blood transfusion on standby during even minor surgery, turning a routine vet visit into a specialist-level event with a specialist-level bill attached. It's exactly the kind of cost that sounds rare, right up until it's your dog on the table and the vet is asking whether you got the test done. The third cost is insurance and liability exposure, and it's the one most first-time owners never see coming until they try to get homeowners insurance. Dobermans appear on the restricted breed lists of a large share of major home insurers, meaning some policies will charge higher premiums specifically because of the breed. Some will exclude liability coverage for dog bites entirely, and in a small number of cities and countries, the breed faces outright ownership restrictions or mandatory muzzling in public. An owner who doesn't check this before bringing the dog home can find out at renewal time that their entire homeowner's policy is now more expensive, or worse, that they need an entirely new insurer altogether, a logistical headache that has nothing to do with how the dog actually behaves and everything to do with a list drawn up by an insurance underwriter who's never met it. The fourth cost is baseline training, and this is the one people budget for a dog toy and end up needing a professional for. Dobermans are working dogs bred for intensity and drive, and an untrained one isn't just inconvenient. With a breed this strong and this smart, a lack of structure can turn into a genuinely difficult, even dangerous adult dog. Group obedience classes run $150 to $400 for a basic course, but Dobermans that don't get enough structure or mental engagement often need private training to correct behavioral issues later, and a private trainer working one-on-one can run $100 to $200 an hour, sometimes across a dozen or more sessions. Skipping this isn't actually cheaper, it just moves the cost from a training budget line to a much larger one down the road, either in professional correction fees or in a dog that's returned to a rescue because the owner couldn't handle what they'd created. Stack those four together: cardiac screening for life, surgical risk from a bleeding disorder, insurance friction, and real training investment, and you start to see why the $300 backyard puppy and the $2,500 health-tested puppy are not actually the same purchase at two different prices. They're two different risk profiles wearing the same face, and there's a bit of irony buried in the breed's own history here. The Doberman was originally bred around 1890 by a German tax collector named Karl Doberman, who wanted a dog intimidating enough to protect him on his rounds. He built a breed engineered from the ground up for toughness and intensity and, as it turned out, engineered a genetic bottleneck for heart disease directly into the same bloodline over a century before anyone understood why. Here's where this stops being just a pet and starts being an actual business, because for a real subset of owners, it genuinely is one. And understanding these mechanics is exactly what separates a breeder who's actually running a viable operation from one who's essentially funding an expensive hobby with occasional puppy sales. The first mechanic is breeding economics, and the math is thinner than people expect. A single litter can produce 6 to 10 puppies, each sellable in the $1,500 to $3,500 range from a reputable program, which sounds like $10,000 to $30,000 of revenue from one litter. For scale, the top end of that range is more money changing hands in one weekend than you'll see move through your own bank account in a year. But the costs eat into that fast. Health testing and certification on both parents before breeding even happens, a stud fee if you don't own the sire, whelping supplies, and veterinary care through the pregnancy. Dobermans are also more prone than many breeds to needing an emergency C-section during whelping due to complications with litter size and puppy positioning, which can run several $1,000s on its own if it happens in the middle of the night at an emergency clinic. A breeder who loses even 1 or 2 puppies to complications or needs an emergency surgery mid-whelp can watch a litter that looked like $20,000 in revenue turn into a number closer to break even. The second mechanic is the trained protection dog market, and this is where the real money actually is. Companies like Trident Protection Dogs and similar kennels take a Doberman with the right temperament and genetics and put it through 6 months to 2 years of structured obedience and protection training, teaching search, perimeter control, controlled bite and release work, and off-lead scenario response. Then sell the finished dog for $45,000 to $75,000 depending on the level of training. That's not a hobbyist number, that's a genuine business model, and it's why elite protection dog kennels exist as real, ongoing companies rather than one-off breeders. For reference, one of those finished dogs is worth more than most people's cars, house down payment, and life savings combined, and it still has to be walked twice a day. The economics only work, though, because the training pipeline has real attrition. Not every dog has the nerve, drive, and temperament to make it through advanced protection work, and the dogs that wash out of the program still cost months of training investment with no $50,000 sale at the end, meaning the finished dogs that do sell have to carry the cost of the ones that didn't make it. The third mechanic is show ring value, and it works less like a direct paycheck and more like a credential. Winning at breed shows doesn't hand an owner prize money worth mentioning. It's the stud fees and increased puppy prices afterward that actually move the needle, sometimes doubling or tripling what a breeder can charge for puppies out of a champion sire or dam. But getting there costs real money first. Entry fees running from tens to hundreds of dollars per show, professional handler fees if you're not showing the dog yourself, and travel to a circuit of shows across a season or two before a dog accumulates enough points to be considered a real champion. Most dogs entered in this circuit never earn their championship at all, meaning the entry fees, handler costs, and travel were a pure sunk cost with no credential to show for it at the end. Let's run the numbers on a small, reputable breeding operation. 2 to 3 litters a year, health-tested parents, doing things the right way. Optimistic scenario, 2 litters in a year, 7 puppies each, sold at an average of $2,200 apiece. That's $30,800 in gross revenue. Stud fees, health testing on both parents, whelping supplies, and routine vet care across both litters run about $6,000. Net profit, roughly $24,800 for the year, which is a genuinely solid outcome for a small-scale, ethical breeding operation and more money than most people manage to save in several years combined. Realistic scenario. One of the 2 litters requires an emergency C-section, adding $4,500 in unplanned veterinary costs and reducing that litter to 5 surviving puppies instead of 7. A puppy from the healthy litter is later diagnosed with a congenital issue during a required health check, triggering a refund to the buyer under the health guarantee most reputable breeders offer. Another $2,200 gone, and your own breeding female, now 5 years old, is flagged during her annual cardiac screening with early signs of DCM, meaning she's retired from breeding immediately per responsible breeding standards, cutting your program down to 1 active female going into next year. Run all of that through the same year, and your $24,800 optimistic profit drops to around $9,600. A swing of over $15,000 driven by 1 surgery, 1 refund, and 1 screening result, none of which is rare in this breed. For scale, that swing alone is more than most people manage to save in a full year of work, wiped out by a single vet bill and a single test result. Then there's the scenario that's specific to Dobermans in a way it isn't for most other breeds, the DCM diagnosis on a dog you already love, not one you're breeding. Once symptoms of congestive heart failure appear, coughing, rapid breathing, lethargy, sometimes fainting episodes, dogs are often already in advanced disease since the earlier stage produces no visible symptoms at all, while the damage accumulates silently. Treatment at that stage focuses on managing symptoms, clearing fluid from the lungs, supporting heart function with medication, rather than reversing anything because the underlying muscle damage doesn't heal. Between specialist cardiology visits, ongoing medication, and emergency visits as the disease progresses, total costs in the final year of a dog's life with advanced DCM can run into the thousands of dollars, on top of a compressed timeline nobody signed up for when they picked out a puppy that looked perfectly healthy at 8 weeks old. For scale, the emotional cost of that scenario is one no dollar figure covers, and it's the reason every major Doberman breed club treats cardiac screening as non-negotiable rather than optional, because the alternative is finding out the hard way at the worst possible time with no warning at all. That's the real lesson of this breed. The sticker price was never the real cost. The real cost is a piece of DNA you can't see that flips a coin on roughly every second dog and doesn't show its hand until years after you've already fallen in love. It's why the entire breed club infrastructure, health testing requirements, mandatory cardiac certification before breeding, published pedigree health histories, exists specifically around this one issue in a way most other breeds simply don't need. A Labrador breeder worries about hips. A Doberman breeder worries about whether the dog's heart is quietly failing behind a completely normal-looking exterior and has to plan an entire breeding program and an entire ownership experience around a risk that can't be seen, only tested for. So, if you do decide to bring home a Doberman, remember the one thing that actually determines whether it was worth it. Not the price of the puppy, but whether you paid for the heart screening before you needed it, not after. That single decision, made or skipped in year one, is the difference between catching a problem while there's still something you can do about it and finding out during an emergency room visit that could have been a routine appointment 2 years earlier. Close the video of the guard dog outside the mansion. You can't afford the mansion, and honestly, you might not be ready for the vet bills either.